Okay, and we're ready.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. My name is Christian Kalinowski, hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is our clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterwards through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. As this is a virtual hearing, there is no sign-in sheet. So if you'd like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed in the hearing notice. This public hearing is being held to consider 5 items. Order number 204210 at 80 Pierce Street to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement, which staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. Order number 204211 at 401 Orizaba Avenue to consider the removal of one street tree without replacement. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. Order number 204212 at 4616 18th Street to consider the removal of one street tree without replacement. Staff denied the removal and the applicant has appealed. Order number 204213 at 834 27th Avenue to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. And finally, order number 204214 for 2 locations in Supervisor District 5 at 2006 Fell Street for the removal of one tree with replacement, and 815 Buena Vista, removal of one tree with replacement, and this will be continued to a later hearing. Staff has approved the removals and the public has protested. My job as the hearing officer is to gather the facts from this hearing items, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the Director. The Director will make final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them, and if you have provided any contact information. The hearing will proceed as follows for the 5 cases. I'll ask the Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I will allow first the property owner or appellate or applicant to speak, then any member of the public or witness who wants to speak, then the department, if the department would like to address any comments, and then the property owner or appellate or applicant again, if the person has any rebuttals. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left. If you are a party to this proceeding, I will call on you to speak, or the clerk will call on you to speak. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak, or please let us know before we speak so that we can provide that access. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. If you are a member of the public or witness who wants to speak, wait for me to call for public comments and then use Zoom's raise your hand feature if you'd like, or if you're on your computer, to put yourself in the queue to speak. If you're dialing in on your phone, dial *9 to indicate that you're raising your hand. When it is your turn to speak, I will recognize you or the clerk will recognize you. If you're on your phone and you're muted, please press *6 to unmute yourself. If you'd like to use visual materials in your presentation, again, please let us know before you speak, and then you will have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. Comments and questions should be addressed to me and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. And I want to express that the chat for this meeting should really be used for technical difficulties. Please raise your hand per the instructions previously mentioned if you'd like to speak. We will now begin the hearing. For order number 204210, may I have Public Works make its presentation?
All right. Hi, I'm Madeline Farquhar. I'm with the Bureau of Urban Forestry. I'm the staff member today who's going to go through all the cases, just lay out the information and the background for all of them, along with some brief presentation slides. So let me share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Just go on to the first order, 80 Pierce Street, order number 204210. Removal of one street tree with replacement. And we approved the removal and the public protested. So here's just a quick picture of the tree. I got a more recent photo on the 26th. It's a Pittosporum undulatum, or a Victorian box tree. We originally came to this site because the property owner reached out saying it was declining and she was concerned about the health and just kind of wanted an inspection to see, you know, if it was a lost cause, or whether, you know, there was something that we could do or she could do to improve the health. So when I arrived, I saw that it was had quite a bit of canopy decline. In the right-hand picture, or sorry, left-hand picture, you can, it's not the greatest picture, the exposure is a little bit bad, but you can see that it's quite thin. If you look a little bit more closely, you can see quite a bit of browning foliage. So typically these are evergreen trees, so they should have a very thick, you know, vibrant green canopy. So immediately when I saw that, I was like, well, we should definitely take a closer look. On the right-hand picture is a more recent photo, and it has declined even further, but I'll show a few more photos. So some of the indications of low vigor in the species that you can see here that I've circled, these are old pruning cuts. Usually whenever a tree is healthy, they can close or seal the wounds fairly easily. You'll see a lot of what we call reaction wood, which is kind of these ridges around the cut. You can see a little bit of that, but seeing those little stubs coming out, you can kind of see some old decayed wood. That is usually an indication of low vigor or poor health in a tree. So it's their inability to kind of seal the pruning wounds. So that's another indication that I saw that made me feel the tree really was losing quite a lot of vigor. And so it's a fairly straightforward case. The property owner has stated to us that they're interested in replacing it as soon as it's removed. So we're in support of that, and it is replaceable. There's the right utility clearances. So that's pretty much it for this case.
Okay, are there any comments? There's no comments to this?
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, I don't think the property owner is at the hearing, but I can share with you. I might have already shared the emails that she sent saying that she's interested in replacing. So
We do have the hand raised from one person from the public. Are you ready for that, Christian?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Nolte, go ahead and speak.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I would like to know the timeline to replacement of this tree, how long it would take to take it out and to replace it with a new mature tree or a tree with that stature. I don't see any power lines. I don't see, a lot of things that would, for a small tree to be planted, should be a medium or big sized tree. and gallon wise to be replaced, since the property owner says they want to replace it. I think, because it's been a tree for a number of years at this location. I am concerned about the other plants or something I can see behind the motorcycle that may obstruct the growth of a new tree, and I would assume that would all be taken out when the tree is taken out too. So therefore, it's not competing with the soil, a new tree with all that soil that's behind that motorcycle in the second picture that was taken a couple days ago. So those are my comments about looking at the recent picture of the current tree. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Thank you.
Madeline, did you want to address any of those comments? Did you have any?
Sure. Yeah. Timeline. We have discussed with the property owner possibility of her getting a removal permit to just go ahead and hire a contractor and remove it herself. She did express that she wanted it to happen as quickly as possible once it was approved. So I do have confidence that she's willing to replace in a timely manner. I don't have the exact time frame. And we would be requiring a large stature species here because of what Mr. Nolte said. There's no overhead utilities. It's a great spot for a large tree. Oh, and yes, and we also have discussed this removal of the succulents. She wanted to save those, so we'll probably she'll likely be responsible for transplanting them before removal.
Understood. Are there any other comments? Okay, and then it didn't sound like the property owner was on to speak.
No, I don't
No.
believe so.
Okay. And so if there are no more comments for this item, I'll close the item and make my recommendations to the director for the 80 Pierce Street location. I'm going to move on to order number 204211 for 401 Orizaba Avenue. May Public Works make its presentation, please.
Okay, thanks. So 401 Orizaba Ave. This is a photo of the tree. It's a Japanese black pine. It is growing against the building. Originally, this site came to us because the property owner was having a slew of concerns about the tree, which we're going to go over. Originally, we saw the photo, and it looks like a very healthy, vigorous tree. So we wanted to really investigate closely on this one. Did want to make a note that it is a street tree, although it's growing against the house. Sometimes it falls within private property, but this one in particular, the public right-of-way goes all the way up to the building. That's where it stops. So it is considered a street tree. So whenever our inspector came and saw this tree a little bit more up close, some issues started to arise. There's quite a bit of crossing branches in the canopy. I'll show a few more slides after this that show kind of the extent of it. Unfortunately, whenever trees grow like this, you want to try to correct this sort of structural defect when they're young, so that when you're making the big cuts or smaller cuts at that point, you're not causing such large injuries to the tree. In this situation where there's so many crossing branches, it almost looks like it's been purposefully braided. I'm sure that's not what it was, but it's very difficult to correct this kind of structure in a way that allows the tree to heal it or seal its wounds. So you can see another issue with these kind of branches, if they have a very acute angle of attachment, they're often very weakly attached. So they have what is called included bark. If you can see with the little yellow arrows, it kind of shows where the crotch of the branch is smashed together, and you can see bark inside the branch union. So it just means that the wood isn't attached. It's very weakly attached. So it can lead to some issues. branch failures. So it's just difficult to correct at this point. And I'll show some more. Here you can see a really large wrapping branch. So whenever we saw these photos and the inspector saw the tree, it's kind of surprising that the tree is still doing so well. This kind of situation is where it will literally choke the tree over time. It will choke itself, which is sad. But these are kind of structural defects we really want to correct when they're young. When they're this old, it's just very difficult. So trying to remove this giant limb from around the tree would take out a lot of the canopy, therefore weakening it further. So it's just a bad situation. Here's another, it's just the opposite side of that, showing, you know, the crossing limbs and the bad unions. And really we would try to prune the tree before removing it. That's what we always try to do, is to mitigate risk before going to tree removal. But it was just that all of these factors going into this decision to approve removal. You can see it's got quite a significant lead towards the road and the sidewalk. I believe it's because it was reaching for the light whenever it was younger, and it was just shaded out on that side of the building. But it is concerning when the roots of on the opposite side of the lean are kind of restricted by, you know, the foundation of the property, restricted by a lot of different things in this situation. So, you know, it doesn't have that ability to really spread out and put on structural buttress roots. So it's just quite constrained. Let's see. There was also evidence of insect damage. So frass is what we usually call like insect excrement, basically. And you know, when they eat parts of the wood and expel frass. So you can see bark beetle damage here. There's another photo here. It almost looks like sawdust, but it's a little darker. It kind of depends on the tree too. So unfortunately, when bark beetles attack the pines here, there's not a whole lot we can do, but it's not an immediate death, but it does cause a lot of health issues with the tree. So here you can see how close it is to the foundation and also just the facade of the building. There is a little bit of a pop out. I'm not sure what you call that in buildings, not a bay window maybe. So the tree is really pressing up against that. It is also hanging over the roof of the building. That's something we could, you know, prune away a little bit, but because it's so close, it's just going to continue being an issue over and over and over again. This is another issue. Sidewalk damage in itself is not a reason to approve removal. However, when the amount of roots you have to prune in order to fix the sidewalk defects is going to be too much for the tree, then it does become an issue. And oftentimes we do have to approve removal in urban settings because of how much root mass you're taking out in order to actually smooth out the sidewalk so that, you know, people can use their driveways again or people won't trip on the sidewalk. It is a balance. You know, we always try to, you know, maintain as much root mass as we possibly can. In this situation, there's just so many constraints that removing a root that large, that close to the base of the trunk would be very, I would not recommend it and have the tree remain. So this is just another picture of the lift here. And the reason why this tree, unfortunately, we're not recommending replacement, is because of the sidewalk width. The actual width of the sidewalk where people are walking is 6 feet, and we need a bit wider sidewalk in order to replant trees. There are a lot of sidewalks in the city that have trees on 6-foot sidewalks, but if we're doing a replacement, we're not replacing those because of how thin, you know, the path of travel is. And the likelihood of sidewalk damage in that path of travel. On the property side, there is an overhang and then also that sort of bay window area. So just don't feel that it is a great place for a tree, especially not one of this size. So that's pretty much it for this particular item.
Gotcha. Is the property owner or applicant available to speak?
We didn't get a confirmation that they were coming, but they did send an email with with a list of the complaints and the issues. So we'll make sure that I believe it was submitted before the hearing.
Okay. Then is there any member of the public or witness who would like to speak?
Mr. Carnes has his hand up.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
Okay, you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so as I attend these tree hearings, we see a lot of trees like this that are, have grown over, I'm guessing that tree is probably around 20 years old, maybe more. And during that time, the weaving effect could have been, improved if it had been taken care of earlier. And so I'm sort of wondering how these trees get to this point in their maturity with all these problems with them. Second comment is it looks like it's what you'd call a significant tree. It's on the property, it's not on the street. And I was wondering who would pay for the removal. Is it the city or the homeowner? That's the end of my comment.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Mr. Nolte.
Well, there's a question there.
Yes, they will be addressed late after everyone has been heard. They're taking notes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I noticed a couple of issues that were brought up during the presentation on this tree. One, it's close to the foundation of the building, and then also making the point that because you said that the sidewalk was six feet sidewalk, but you never mentioned what is the width between the sidewalk and the planting area, because you have two trees. You have the tree that's being taken out, and you have another tree or bush beside it. So therefore, there's dirt between the two, between the sidewalk and the house. So there is room, because you're replying it's only a 6-foot sidewalk, but there is room between the sidewalk and the house. So that would even be wider, and that would be, again, it would fall under being a significant tree because it's not on the sidewalk right away. It's between the sidewalk and the house, and so I see the damage that is done to the driveway and so forth during the presentation, but I feel again, because the trunk is pretty thick, so that's 20 plus years, and so since this is next to the property, this is sort of kind of quasi falls probably to the property owner, not necessarily to DPW, and so that the property owner has been neglected in this tree to have it at this stage of life, where it's at now. And so I would question not replacing it with a smaller stature tree, because I don't see, a smaller statue tree because you have another tree in front of it. And you didn't say you've taken that, or bush, whatever it is, in this last picture, that there is room for something to grow there. So I would like to see some kind of replacement of a smaller stature tree, so it won't interfere with the foundation and also won't interfere with the way the building windows or something come out. So it would not obstruct the building the way it's built. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then there's Mr. Clip. Go ahead.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. In terms of the lack of replacement, I keep bringing this up that I would really encourage the city to, when thinking about replacement, not necessarily think about like a one-for-one exactly in the exact same spot, because we know that there is such a huge need to plant pretty much anywhere in the city, and especially in some of these southern neighborhoods where there is so little canopy and so much freeway congestion and air pollution. And to that, I would also encourage the city to think about replacements, not just in terms of one for one, but in terms of the actual benefits lost. So more of a biomass replacement formula. I know that's something that the city is thinking about right now. And if we start implementing it, then it's not so hard to follow if and when it eventually becomes part of the law. And in this specific neighborhood, you know, there's not only, it seems like a ton of available, what may not be available basins, but also so much impermeable surface that even if there is absolutely nowhere to plant a new tree in that vicinity, there is certainly opportunity to remove impermeable surface. And so when we're thinking about replacements, really, I'm just asking, you know, the city to please start thinking outside the box, not just in terms of, you know, this very narrow window of this specific tree in this specific place, but to think about the entirety of the ecosystem and our climate needs, and specifically as these types of ideas are consistent with our climate emergency and our city's climate action strategy, that we need to take actions that compensate for the losses to our ecosystem and look at climate change and carbon mitigation. So I know our city is really good at staying in its lanes, and I guess I'm asking us not to, because we need to have a much more holistic, integrated approach to each and every one of these instances if we're going to make any meaningful change. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands, Mr. Kalinowski. I don't see any more.
Okay. And then would the department like to address any of the comments that were mentioned?
Yeah, sure. I'll go over these. First, how trees kind of get this far in terms of like bad structure and still standing. It's different. It is different for every species. Sometimes, I mean, obviously you can see this pine has really weird structure and it's still vigorous, like for now. We did see some decline. I'm not sure if that's because it just has such a dense canopy that's shading below, but it's kind of just different for every species how long it takes for those kind of girdling branches and girdling roots to cause a full decline. Also, the reason why, likely why it has poor structure, there was, you know, up until July 1st of 2017, the city went back and forth with having responsibility for certain trees and then also relinquishing the responsibility back to property owners. So there are a lot of large stature trees in the city that have poor structure because of this irregular maintenance. So it's very likely why you see this. Another thing to point out is that it actually is not a significant tree. It is a street tree. And but that the reason why it's on the fact that it's against the building might have, you know, contributed to confusion over whose responsibility it was over the decades that it's been living. However, just for the record, it actually is a street tree. It's totally within the public right of way, within public property. So it's not behind the property line. And a significant tree is defined as a tree that is behind the property line, so on private property, but within 10 feet of that property line, and it also has to meet certain size requirements. So even though it's on the property side, it's actually a street tree, which is not typical. So an interesting thing. The landscaped area, if I have not been out to measure it exactly, but I'm assuming if there's a 6-foot sidewalk, it's around 9 feet wide because it's a 15-foot right of way or just about there. So I can confirm that. And I can go back to the inspector and also the property owner to see about a small stature, like Mr. Clip said, there might be another spot that would be better. Here in this location, I wouldn't recommend it just because of that. I think it's called a bay window. I'm not sure. It pops out from the building. You can't see it in this photo, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it there. Even a small tree, I mean, you could get something really small there, but there might be a better location nearby. So that's an option. I think that was it. Yes, I think that's it.
Okay. And again, the property owner applicant did not attend this hearing. Is that correct?
I do not believe so, unless they're hiding in the attendees.
Okay. Then if there are no other comments for this item, I will close it and make a determination or make a recommendation to the director for this. I'd like to proceed to order number 204212 for 4616 18th Street. May I have Public Works make its presentation?
Yes, this was a removal permit that came to us, and the staff inspector has decided to deny. So just comments from the applicant, and I believe the applicant is here, so they'll chime in whenever it's their time to speak. They've had a lot of issues with the root system of this tree because unfortunately it is not planted to code, and it is very, very close to the sewer, I believe also the water and a utility pole. So they've incurred a lot of costs in terms of plumbing repairs. There's been, sidewalk damage and also damage to their stairs because of the ficus roots. So there are some issues. There's also some structural issues, which I'll go through in just a minute. But the determination after reviewing it quite closely is that we wanted to deny this particular permit because we do believe that there are certain steps that we can take to mitigate the risk and mitigate the issues with this tree. For one thing, the tree is very, very healthy. It's very vigorous. You see this with a lot of ficus around the city. They do really well, but they do cause issues. So we want to be, mindful of that and strike a balance. The other issue is that this being on the sidewalk and being a street tree, so close to utilities, and not able to replace this tree, unfortunately. So that did factor in to our decision to deny. So the combination of the fact that we do believe we can mitigate the risk by significantly reducing the canopy and the fact that it's not replaceable, those are our main reasons for denial. But I'll go through some of the issues with the tree just so you know. So it's a medium-sized ficus tree. It does have, very poor structure. We have been approving the significant reduction of canopy and ficus around the city because we found that can mitigate some of the risk of the branch failures. But you can see a little bit of what I was talking about with the other tree, which is, we call it included bark. And it's when, the wood isn't attached together at the branch union. It's basically, there's bark in the middle. So it just causes, it's a weak attachment. If you can reduce the canopy quite a bit, it helps because there's less end weight to kind of pull and force those branches apart. There's some more included bark in the upper canopy as well. So those are just some photos documenting that. It is approximately 3 feet from the sewer line. Code says that you should be at least 5 feet away. So there is an issue with that. That means, you know, we can't replace it in that location, at least. We are typically able to approve root pruning for ficus trees because they're very vigorous and they can handle it quite well. So typically we'll approve it a few times before actually initiating removal, as long as it's not too close to the tree and we can maintain, you know, at least 75% of the root mass. That is what we try to look for. So here's just some pictures of the sidewalk. And also I do have some more photos of that crack in the stairway. So here's just a photo documenting that it is blocking the street light. They're very vigorous. We do believe that, you know, reduction of canopy would help with that. So this is where the sidewalk has it's either lifted in some areas or kind of depressed because of a root. It's kind of, sometimes it ripples a little bit, and that's why, you know, the sidewalk has sort of like moved down and caused that vertical crack. It's very, very likely from tree roots. And here's just evidence that the fracture's been there for a while, since 2008 at least. And that is pretty much the overview for this particular tree.
Okay. Would the property owner like to speak?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
The notification that I received for the denial of my permit request stated that the primary reason was the inability to replace the tree. That surprised me a little bit. So I asked, why is that? And I was told because of proximity to the street light and to the overhead utilities. My conclusion from those comments is that there really should not be a tree in this location, period, end of story. And, you know, I would appreciate action on the city's part to mitigate if that proves to be successful. But if I recall correctly, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we passed a ballot proposition where the city reassumed responsibility for street tree maintenance. Prior to that, I was spending $400 or $500 a year to have the tree pruned. And I stopped doing that after that ballot proposition became effective. But of course, there's been no action. So the biggest question I have, given what I just heard, is the city going to assume responsibility here to take the actions necessary to reduce the destructiveness of the tree? Or is that going to be at my expense? If I'm going to spend money, I would much rather spend money to remove the tree, because it is destructive and there's ample evidence that it will continue to be destructive in its current condition. I would also note, if there's anyone here who doesn't like the idea of removing trees, I don't like them either. But there are, in my block alone on 18th Street, there are about 20 residences that lack street trees. They're my end of the block, you know, most of the houses have street trees, but as you walk up towards Danvers, almost none of them do. We live in an area with lots of green space close by, so it's not as though the earth needs this particular tree in general. I think those are my basic points.
Sir, could you please state your name for the record, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Larry Alden, I'm the homeowner.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alden. Okay. Okay, and that conclude your statement? You have 20
Yes.
seconds. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay. And is there any member of the public or witness who would like to speak?
We have Lance Carnes. Go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
Okay, I think I'm here. You hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the tree, with the subject tree here, 4616 18th, unfortunately never appeared on the online tree removal listing, which is a requirement for removal. If Buff decides to allow removal, it should be reposted correctly and continued to a future removal hearing. Also, a shout out to our friends on 24th Street who are trying to preserve an historic ficus tree. And Mr. Kalinowski, if you could convey to the Buff management and Nick Crawford, please allow tree 569 to remain as recommended by 2 experienced arborists hired by neighbors. Thank you.
And we have thank you, Mr. Carnes. And we have Josh Clip.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, there's a lot of loud construction outside. So regarding the competing infrastructure, it happens a lot around the city that after a tree is planted, a city puts in infrastructure, and then years down the road says the infrastructure means that the tree can't be replaced. And so my question, I guess this is probably a larger question than Madeline can answer, is why the city does not consider existing trees when putting in other forms of infrastructure, especially now as our city has acknowledged that trees are a form of climate and green infrastructure, which are critical in its climate action strategy. That said, I'd also like to just reiterate my comments about replanting in the vicinity and replanting in alignment with our climate action strategy. And speaking of the vicinity, I'm curious about how this ficus compares to all the other ficus along that particular corridor. The majority, it would seem, the majority of the canopy on that corridor is ficus. So I'm not sure, are we prioritizing removal of this one because the property owner asked for it, or because it actually needs to go right at this moment? And if, for instance, what would happen if the remaining property owners also asked for the removal of their ficus? Would those be granted? And if so, what's the street going to look like in a few years? Thanks.
Okay. And then we have John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Good morning. I have some issues with what's going on here. This is going to be on 18th Street, and the SFMTA was taking out ficus trees on 18th Street. When I had that a couple of hearings ago. So I assume this is outside the boundaries of because it's further up of what those were, because it went up to church. So, and I see a map in the corner here because of this last slide. So I don't know what the cross street is of this. So I'm not sure if it's past Church Street or not. And so I'm concerned about why it wasn't included in those postings. And all of a sudden the property owner wants this one out. So I'm a little concerned about the loss of canopy on 18th Street as we move forward. And this is again another ficus tree, and I think experimental pruning would help in the dealing with the. Because I didn't hear anything wrong really with the canopy, and so I think that would be the first step. Would be experimental pruning on the tree to deal with the branches above, and then also do the sidewalk repair on the bottom. And since you said it was pretty, you're just sort of denying this in the first place, that would help. The experimental pruning would help with the lighting of the street light that's there. And also, I didn't hear really any issue currently with the sewer line. So again, I don't see enough issues here to warrant the removal of the tree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see no more hands.
Then would the department like to address any of the comments?
Yes, I've made some notes, and in terms of addressing Mr. Alder's Larry's comment about if we're resuming responsibility, yes, and on July 1st, 2017, that is what he was referencing, the ballot measure. That Proposition E took effect, and we call it Street Tree SF now. However, if damage happened before July 1st, 2017, it is the responsibility of the property owner. Any further sidewalk damage that occurs from the tree or tree maintenance responsibilities like pruning, removal if it becomes hazardous, if it dies, that is the responsibility of Public Works. However, I would like to say, Mr. Nolte mentioned that there wasn't sewer issues. I believe there were sewer issues, and that it has cost thousands of dollars for the property owner. However, I did also want to make clear that sewers are not a part of the maintenance agreement. So the upper lateral that starts from usually the curb, or what they call the P-trap, the little square, sewer clean out on the street, from there towards the building, that is property owner responsibility. Everything going out to the street is Public Works. So just wanted to make that clear. And I also wanted to make it clear that we did deny this removal permit. We did not review any of the other ficus on the street. I'm not sure what Mr. Nolte is referring to in terms of removals on 18th, because this is not my particular zone, but I can follow up with the inspector for this area on that. However, the cross street is Hattie, Hattie. So just wanted to let him know that, and maybe that clarifies it a little bit. But this was a removal permit, so that's why we came to the tree, because it was requested, it was paid for, our inspection, and we chose to deny this removal permit. I will also follow up with Mr. Karn's concerns about the fact that this tree did not appear on the removal website. So I just need to confirm that and get back to everyone on it. That's it.
Okay. And then would the property owner again like to speak or offer a rebuttal to any of the comments here? Nope. I assume not. I'm not hearing anything. And then lastly, I have a question myself. And looking at one of the slides, Madeline, you had mentioned that the city is responsible for the sewer from the sewer trap to, I guess, the roadway or the sewer main. And so on the picture on the left, there are two boxes there, and I was curious which is the trap that the sewer takes over, or the city takes over sewer maintenance from.
May I interject before you answer? Mr. Alden did raise his hand. I don't know if you wanted to hear from him before continuing with your question.
Sure, yeah.
Mr. Alden, did you want to speak? Mr. Alden, can you hear me? You can unmute your mic.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to clarify to Mr. Nolte that we're up near the Market Street end of 18th Street. I think the main point I have is I think you referred to it as experimental pruning, to cut back on the canopy. I've seen other trees in the neighborhood where they've done, really severe cutback. Is the city going to do that?
Can I speak?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. This is Madeline. Yes, that is likely what we would do to mitigate the risk. I need to confirm. I don't know what timeline it would be considering like it's a removal permit. Yeah, I need to confirm before I give you like a solid answer on that one. That is what we would do during the area's regular maintenance. So the reason why I also wanted to clarify the reason why folks, some people in sections of the city haven't seen any maintenance yet. Whenever we started Street Tree SF, there were certain areas of the city that were categorized as more hazardous based on the number of dead trees, really, and also the number of what the survey considered as hazardous. So we classified everything and we went to those areas of the city first. So there are quite a few areas we have not been to yet since Street Tree SF's began. So we are a bit delayed because of the pandemic, but we are still trying to hit a 3 to 5 year cycle moving forward. And that is what we would do for this tree to mitigate the risk during the area's regular maintenance, but I just don't know the timeline. So I didn't want to make any major promises on that. Oh, and should I answer the sewer question?
Yes, I believe he's done.
Okay. Yes.
No, actually,
Oh, go ahead.
I do have just a follow-up query. These trees really need to be pruned annually. Maybe after, what sounds like it'll be a more severe pruning that you have in mind for this tree, that won't be necessary. But I actually called 311 and was told that this area was scheduled for treatment last year. I'm just assuming that COVID difficulties didn't allow that to happen. But I would appreciate a follow-up if I can get at least a range of dates when we can expect action to occur, partly because the tree's grown up against the side of my house. And, during windy periods, it's abrading the paint, et cetera. And I want to get the house repainted and I can't do it with the tree in its current condition.
Right. Yes, I can follow up. We can follow up with you on when it is, when the new range of dates is for this particular area. I'm not sure, but it likely was. We had a lot of contracts lined up, and then they were delayed, unfortunately. But we are back doing the contracts now. They're just kind of slow rolling, getting back up to speed. So yes, we'll follow up with you for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then for the sewer, Christian, I'm actually not sure why there's 2 cleanouts. I have seen that sometimes. I do not know why that is, but it would be at the curb, the one at the curb.
Okay.
I think PUC, this is something I would have to confirm again. I have a diagram that shows where city responsibility and property owner meet. It's usually at the curb or what they call the P-trap.
Mhm. Okay. All right. And so if there are no more comments for this item, I'll move to close it, and then I'll make my recommendations to the director. I'd like to move on to the next order. And we have order number 204213 for 834 27th Avenue.
Okay, so yes, 834 27th Avenue. This is an Arbutus marina or strawberry tree, they call it in the city. And it was brought to my attention by a property owner who lives on this block. One right next to it succumbed to the same sort of issues and was removed recently. And so they wanted us to come back and give this one a health check to see what was going on. Typically what we'll do with these trees, there's unfortunately a pathogen. We don't know exactly what it is, but we call it Arbutus canker. And that's what we're making an educated guess on what it is. You see it all over the city. Unfortunately, these trees, they typically start to die, or the wood starts to die from the base of the tree moving upward. You'll just see kind of like a darkened area on the base of the tree. It turns sort of ashy gray, and then the bark starts to split. Typically, they're not terribly unstable, but because of this one had such a long crack, I was concerned about leaving it for too long. sits over 5 feet of a vertical crack in the tree. So that is the main reason that I posted it for removal. It does have quite a bit of canopy decline. That happens eventually. You'll start to see the cracks first, and then the canopy will eventually start to go. All of the leaves will turn black, and it will just kind of stand there like that for a while. Unfortunately, this one had a lean though, and a very large crack. So, and quite a bit of the wood was dead, right? About 50% of the trunk. So that's just those are the main reasonings. And it is replaceable, not in the sidewalk, because I mentioned 6-foot sidewalk, but we can replace it in the setback here. There's just another picture of the wounds. So where the red arrow is, that's a good spot for replacement. The public right-of-way actually goes quite a bit into the landscaping area. It's technically in the path of travel. So we would designate, if this tree is approved for removal, we would designate the 2 squares against the curb as the path of travel, and then the setback as, landscaped area. And that's where we would want the replacement. And that is pretty much it for this one.
Okay. Would the property owner or applicant like to speak, or are they on the call here?
Not sure if they're on. They didn't apply, just kind of reached out. So they might not be on today.
We have Leanne Weldon. I'm not sure. Are you the property owner?
I am the property owner.
Okay, go ahead.
So we're really sad actually about this tree. It was really healthy when we bought the house, and it has slowly died. We took care of it. We pruned it. We pruned it against those wires that are really close. I know that we made sure that nothing was there to get the runaway. Anyway, we're really sad this tree is dying. We definitely want to see it replaced. But this tree is slowly dying, and we saw what happened to the one next to it, and it really is in the way, and it's just worrisome the way it creaks when the wind blows. So as you can see from the landscaping in our yard, we love trees. We're looking at talking to a landscape architect about putting another tree exactly where that red arrow is. So it's good to hear that the city's also potentially, that's a possibility that we can explore with FUF. So that's all I wanted to say, is that we're sad that this tree is going as well. There aren't a lot of trees on our blocks except for the landscaping in our yard, and we continue to add landscaping and talking about planting a tree in our backyard as well. But this one is unfortunately seen its life cycle come to an end. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak?
We have John Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Looking at what I see in this picture of the last picture of the slide of the tree, a couple of issues up in my mind. I see wires above it, so therefore I would assume you would put a small stature tree where the arrow is if you're going to replace it, so they won't be hitting into those wires going into the house that the property owner and its neighbors, whatever ones are going currently through the canopy of the, if they were going through the canopy of the, because it could be deceiving, this picture of the current tree as it's located. So I would put a small stature tree so that it wouldn't affect those wires. Next would be the issue is, I don't know what, you're saying it's 15 feet from the sidewalk to the house. If that's true, and you're taking already like, I don't know, 2 squares, which would be about, I don't know, so many feet, then you're left with so many feet from the house to where the arrow is. If there would be any other conflicting issues, because I also see it's next to the driveway for the house. I assume that's the driveway, seeing where the curb cut is. So the issue would be, we don't want, I don't want, have, have, DPW coming back and dealing with, or the property owner doing with, tearing up their slot, their garage. I'm sure they want access to their garage on the site. Lastly, so I would suggest a small 15-gallon one to start off with because of where the location of this is, and because of the issues that have been discussed of how this tree is slowly dying. And thank you very much for the property owners taking care of the tree for so many years.
Thank you. And we have Lance Carnes. Go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
Yeah, I'd like to, you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'd like to back up what Mr. Nolte just said about the homeowner taking responsibility for the tree for so many years and looking to add more trees to the neighborhood. And from the photograph I'm looking at here, it doesn't show that much of the street, but I'm just looking down the sides of the street in the vicinity, and there aren't that many trees. There's probably, looks like there are no trees on the block. If you head towards, I'm not sure what direction it is. So yeah, I think it'd be great if they put one on their front yard and maybe get their neighbors to ask for trees from FOF or BOF or add their own trees. So, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, so thank you again to the homeowner.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Clip. Go ahead, Josh Clip.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just very briefly again, seconding John's and Lance's statements, thanking the homeowners and expressing some appreciation for their conscientiousness and desire to do the right thing here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments from the public?
There are no more hands.
And majority of those comments were comments instead of questions. But Madeline, is there anything you'd like to address here?
I think I am good. I think
Okay.
that, yeah, those are all great comments.
And then does the property owner have any other last comments before we move on?
Go ahead, Ms. Weldon.
You're super welcome. I appreciate everybody as well. It's nice to have a little happiness to end this meeting on. I will also say this picture doesn't show that there's a playground directly across the street with a number of street trees that are supported by the city. So luckily we do have some green space and a little happiness on the street. This doesn't look like it from this photo, but actually there's a very bright and active playground right across the street. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for the comments. If there are no more comments for this item, I am going to close the item and move to the next order after I make my recommendations to the director. So order number 204-214 for 2 locations in District 5. And we'll start with the 2006 Fell Street. May Public Works make its presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to start with 2006 Fell, but I wanted to make a note that we are rescheduling 815 Buena Vista Avenue West for another hearing. And then the reason because of that is because there was unfortunately a typo on Buena Vista Ave West. It was 851 on the order. So because we weren't able to amend the order in time, we're rescheduling that item. So we're just going to do 206 Fell.
Okay.
So this is 2006 Fell Street. I believe this just came to my attention because one of my coworkers drove past it and kind of did a level 1 inspection saying we should take a closer look because it is a blackwood acacia melanoxylon. And these large, when they get this large, we do want to try to keep a keen eye on them. They tend to whole tree fail, which is when they will fail at the roots. That's those, very big splashy images you see in the newspaper of the trees falling across the street. So we always want to, give it a really close eye, and make sure we're monitoring them. And that once I came to the tree, I could see that it had quite a bit of canopy decline. You can't see it that great from this picture, but the tree next to it is also an acacia, and you can just, even from this bad picture, you can tell how vigorous that tree looks, how healthy it looks as opposed to this one that's quite bare and has a really low, what we call live crown ratio, which means there's a lot more trunk as opposed to canopy. Makes for poor structure and bad branch unions. So this is the main concern that I had when I came to it, was the base of the trunk. You can see that there's a cavity in the base, and I measured it and it came out to be nearly 18-inch cavity. But because it wasn't going straight through the middle of the tree, that would be a lot more concerning. It was more angled downward. I didn't, classify it as an emergency or anything like that, but it is something to take a look, closer and try to initiate removal in a tree like this. The other reason being, as you can see from the right-hand picture, is that what we're looking for in a healthy tree or a tree with healthy roots is like a very good, we call it trunk taper or a trunk flare. And that's when, the base of the trunk is kind of flaring out like this. And that means that the tree is putting on really good structural roots. It's really stuck in there in the soil. But if you see something like this where the base of the trunk is almost going inward or really straight into the soil, that's usually an indication that there might be girdling roots underneath the ground. So there's roots wrapping around the base of the trunk, which can really choke out both the roots and the canopy. So that's another reason why the declining canopy is concerning. So that was the major reasons why I posted it for removal, just concern over rooting and the health of the tree. There, you can also just see, there's previous branch failures in this tree. You can see decay in the branch failure, another sign of low vigor, like an inability for the tree to seal its wounds, which is not a good sign. And so that's pretty much it for 2006 Fell. Also just wanted to make note that it's just a very high target area on Fell Street, a lot of cyclists, runners, baby strollers, traffic. It was just a very high traffic area.
Understood. Okay, and then is there a property owner, or I suppose this is investigation by Public Works itself? So are you the applicant?
Yeah, we haven't had any correspondence with the property owner through the whole thing. It was just kind of a by site inspection that was brought to my attention to go take a look. So yeah, we were investigating it.
Okay. So then is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this order?
We have Lance Carnes. Go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
So, hello. Oh, can you hear me
yes,
okay?
We can hear you.
So uncharacteristically for me, I'm going to actually make another couple of positive comments. I looked at the agenda for today, and it looked like, you did reschedule 851 Buena Vista West to continue another hearing. I was wondering why you had done that. And it's my pet peeve with Buff is you guys can't get the numbers and addresses right. And I think probably someone scrawled this on a removal form, and then poor Cerise had to type it in. And if you use your database, which I do, I don't walk around and look at all these trees. I look at some of them, but not all of them. I go in the database and I try to find the tree, and I immediately noticed that you transposed 815 or 851 to 815 or vice versa. So, and I feel very sorry for Cerise having to type in all this data. It's in the database. You could actually print out all this stuff onto a spreadsheet and you just paste it into your agenda. So there you go. positive comments from a landscaper. I want you to make a note of that and post it up somewhere. Just joking. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Carnes. And we have Josh Clip. Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I just wanted to put in a plug for as large a species replacement as possible, given the lack of what appears to be conflicting overhead infrastructure and the fact that this large tree managed to live there for so long. So that's just putting in a plug for a large species. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Nolte. Go ahead, Mr. Nolte.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I noticed in the prior to this last slide, the sidewalk around this tree was repaired. And so I'm questioning whether when you repaired that sidewalk, it's just the discoloration of the, you know, two different colors of the sidewalk there. In the middle, it's one color, and then the either side is another color. So you can see that there's been repair done to the sidewalk, and that might have affected the roots when they did the sidewalk. And so I would like to, you know, more discussion of how long ago that those, you know, I see somebody, you know, writing their name on the sidewalk. But anyway, when that was done and how many years ago, and it was done under DPW. So therefore, this is sort of indirect possible die out or issues connected to the street repair that was, or sidewalk repair that was done around this tree. It may affect the some of the issues that are being discussed today found by Buff. So I would look at either which way direction that information, because I know they have databases on every tree or whatever they have in their, you know, in their databases. So I you know, because if it's found that this was done by Buff or by the property owner, it might be a dual sort of question of who would take responsibility, because it was pointed out before 2017, it was the property owner possibly. And so if the property owner did these problems with the sidewalk, then it might have caused additional issues, how it was done properly or improperly, and affected the tree as it is standing now. So I think they should look into that level of research about the repair of the sidewalk and how it's affecting tree. And again, since this is a large stature tree with no other conflicting issues in the immediate area of the tree, I would suggest a large stature tree to be put in to the location. And then there would be the question of the timeline of replacing a tree, because that seems to be always a question when we have these hearings. We've had the Bureau of Urban Forester
30 seconds.
6 months, a tree would be replaced, and I'm not hearing it this hearing. So I'm questioning the timeline. Normally is after the permit is permitted, the tree should be replaced within 6 months. So that's my other question is for any of the trees to be removable on this agenda, what is the timeline? And normally it's 6 months for the replacement. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more hands. That's all.
Okay, Madeline, would you like to address any of the comments?
Sure. Yeah, we're the species that we're choosing for Fell Street for replacements is Brisbane box. So it's a large stature tree. It's good for high traffic areas. Good, you know, well structured tree typically. So that's what we would replace it with. We are typically saying 6 months is the timeline for replacements of trees at, for removal hearings. So that's not Mr. Nolte's questions, as well as sidewalk repair. I just took a quick look in the database. It looks like there was sidewalk repair way back in 2001 but I do not believe it was this particular sidewalk that I did notice that there was new sidewalk next to it when inspecting. From Google Street View, it looks like that particular area was done sometime between 2015 and 2017. Just judging by Google Street View, it is definitely a concern with blackwood acacias. We try to avoid root pruning altogether if possible. In certain situations, it's not possible to avoid certain root pruning of trees, but we try to mitigate it as much as we can. I don't know if that is the particular issue that caused this decline. If I had to give an opinion, it would be that there are likely girdling roots underneath the soil that we cannot see based on the trunk taper. And it also looks like perhaps there was a wound when it was younger, perhaps from a car door, because it's the street side where that cavity is. And that could be contributing to it as well. That's more likely to me in this case, but it's hard to know for sure.
Okay. All right, so if there are no other comments for this item, I'm going to close the item and make my recommendations to the director. And before we close the meeting here, I want to ask if there are any public comments on any of the items on the agenda. And I'd like to remind you that if you have spoken, you will not be allowed to speak again, and that this time is really for those who have not had a chance to comment earlier. Has anybody raised their hand, or is there anybody who would like to speak?
There are no hands, no.
Okay. Well, if there are no more public comments, I am going to move to close this hearing. And the hearing is now closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.